We were actually neighbors in San Ramon before we had children, and our husbands met at the men's fraternity, the men's retreat that CPC held. So this was like, it was when Joey's like 9 now. So it was like 10 years ago, 10 years ago, before we had children. And we like actually had dinner as adults without children. It was nice. But so Mitzie was also my first friend at Mothers Together too. I saw her in the parking lot when I drove in. I was like, hey. So, but I also want to say, Mitzie, she's been the teacher coordinator the past 3 years with Mothers Together. And I mean, I've witnessed it from day one and even before, because she was a facilitator and she just took on many roles. And God has gifted her with so many skills and talents. And we're just so thankful that Mitzie was able to hold the fort down with the whole teaching team. And, she's always fun. She wears really cute, fun outfits that kind of brings out her fun personality. So, but yeah, she's going to continue to, I think, speak next year a couple times, but I just want to give a big shout out to Mitzie for her hard work the past few years.
Thanks so much, Jackie. That's so nice. Are we ready? Okay. As Jackie said, we made it, you guys. We have made it through this.
Mitzie, hold on. I think somehow you got muted.
Oh,
there we go.
Sorry. Can you hear me now? Oh, Tammy's muted. Okay. Okay, we made it through the study of Isaiah. Pat yourselves on the back. It is a huge book of the Bible. It's 66 chapters long, and it's been called the Bible in miniature because the Bible is 66 books long. So you can see this little card, like essentially, you guys, you have like the cheat sheet for the Bible under your belt now. Like you have the whole story of God and his people, and the message that's at the heart of it. So I want everybody to feel good about that. And I wanted to give you just like a little idea of like a funny thing about why context is important. So Isaiah gives us the context of our faith, and that the center is our faith in Jesus. But around that is what we've been learning all year. It's been pointing to that. But context matters. So love talking about babies. Michelle, that was so awesome to share. I totally agree. And I see the little babies on the screen. So this is something we say to friends, right? Congratulations on your baby. But if you put quotation marks right here, it wouldn't be as nice. It's like, congratulations on your baby. It's like kind of rude. Or you can put quotation marks right here. And then it says, congratulations on your baby, which also sounds kind of rude. And then finally, you could tell them, congratulations on your baby. Like maybe they had a monkey or something. So context matters. And you guys, we've gotten that this year in Isaiah. And a couple fun facts about Isaiah that I wanted to share is that its influence extends beyond the Christian community. It's affected English literature, poetry, music, history, all these things that have happened in Isaiah, all the prophecies that happen, they actually are recorded that they took place in the New Testament. And Isaiah 2:4, which Natalie shared with us at the beginning of the year, is about how God himself will be the one to unite the nations in peace. And that is the unofficial verse of the United Nations. It is on a huge stone wall in a park in New York, right outside their headquarters. So just thought that was interesting. But as believers, for us, Isaiah gives us the context, as we talked about, for our faith, the past, present, and future, the full story of God. So I'm going to recap a little bit, and then we're going to go on to what do we do from there? What's next? So in the beginning of the year, Natalie talked about how God, as our loving father, the loving father of the Israelites, was grieved by the wickedness of his children, and he's bound by his own goodness to bring justice. He couldn't ignore the things they were doing. He put it off for as long as he could, and they were just too cruel and too oppressive and too hypocritical. So then Jackie shared with us about how conflict is what happens when we're not putting God first. The Israelites did it, we do it. And they destroyed the sweetness that they can have and that we can have when God is in our story, as Amanda shared. So as I mentioned, the heart of Isaiah and the heart of the Bible is where the justice and the mercy meet. Emily shared about God's furious love for us and that he will do whatever it takes to rescue his children. And then Eliana shared so boldly with us, and I love her voice. Like, she could just tell me anything and I would just think it's amazing. But what she was sharing was amazing, is amazing. That the best news ever is that through Jesus Christ, we are saved. And she had that t-shirt on that said, tetelestai, meaning it is finished. And she explained that our belief gives us eternal life. And our theme song for the year that we just listened to, it was so fun to watch today because I'm at my husband's workstation. It was like ginormous. All of you are so big and beautiful. The theme song says, the fight's been won. And what if I were to tell you also that the work's already been done, that it's not something that we can strive for to accomplish? Because if that were the case, it says, explain to me what the cross is for. So a quote I love by Tim Keller, we've been talking about the good news all year, the best news ever. He says, the gospel is called news because it's not, and not advice, because advice is a suggestion of what you should do, but news is the report of what's been done. And in this case, what's been done for you. And Monica shared about our new identity in Jesus, how we are adopted, we are loved, redeemed, forgiven, blessed, and all those things. So here we are today. We've been studying this all year. We've had people share wonderful testimonies with us. So now what? And I just wanted to address something first. Is not the good news or the best news for everybody, right? Like, clearly not everyone is running around saying, this is the best news ever. But to those who want to be saved, salvation is the best news ever. So think about, what was your reaction when you got the news that you were pregnant? It's joy, it's celebration and tears, and there are all these over the top gender reveals and stuff. My friend and Jackie's friend, maybe some of you know her, Rachel Cruz, she was on America's Funniest Home Videos for her gender reveal because she had 3 girls, and then the last one was a boy, and the husband went so nuts and dropped what he was holding and screamed and ran out in the street. And, you know, they didn't win like $10,000 or anything, but they were on TV for this excitement of this news, right? I mean, I remember telling my parents, and we got them on video, and my dad was like, oh, that's great. And then he processed what I told him, and he was like, no, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever. Because when we get good news, it affects us, right? Like, we celebrate or it breaks our heart. But those that really want something, then it really matters and affects us then when we get it. So Emily had shared about her struggles with infertility. And with my friend's permission today, I just wanted to share a story. And if you have little ears listening, I would kind of just be careful because it's dark. But the reason I want to share it is because the darkness is what makes the light so much more intense, and this best news ever actually be something that we would get excited about. So my friend Becky, I went to UC Santa Barbara, and I was in a big house on the beach with these other girls. We called it the Love Shack, and they're coming up in July. I'm so excited to see them. It's been 20 years. I mean, it's been like 5 years because I'm right out of college. But I have lost a little bit of touch with Becky over the last several years because it's been really hard for her because she also struggled with infertility, and then kind of pulled back from our group because she's watched us all just have all these babies. And understandably, it's been really hard for her. And I honestly didn't know what to say to her because of all of us, I'm going to tear up too. Shoot, Michelle. Becky should have been the first one to have a baby. Like, no offense to the other ladies, and I'm so grateful for mine, but like, she was the earth mama, you guys. Like, she grew up on a commune. She was a surfer. She was smart. She was and is still organized. She knew how to cook, and was never lost her temper. Which when I look back, that's kind of strange for like, we were like 20 and we were like, this is going to be the world's best mom. And she struggled for the last 12 years with this. And after they realized that they weren't going to be able to conceive, they threw themselves into efforts to adopt. And when those actually they got a successful adoption. They got so excited, they decorated the baby room. And the first time that happened, the 15-year-old mom decided after the baby was born, 2 days after, that she was going to change her mind and keep the baby. So my friend Becky had to go home to a nursery that she decorated with no baby. And then the second time later, when they were able to work towards, and it's so much work, another successful adoption, she flew across the country to get this baby, and it was stillborn. So, I mean, understandably, she questioned her faith. And I honestly questioned God too, because like I said, she should have been the first one to hold a precious little baby. And my husband and I have these kids, and we're like, we shouldn't leave the hospital. Like, all these nurses should come home with us. Like, and she would have been better at this. Like, I know. But I'm so happy to report, you guys, 3 weeks ago, at 40 years old, she and I have the birthday the same week. She got baby Lucia. And so she has this new little baby, and it's the best news. Like, our text chain of ladies, and it's been such a touchy subject for so long. And now she's like, we can't get enough pictures of this baby, you guys. Like, we want to FaceTime with this baby. We can't wait to meet this baby. Like, this baby's a big deal. So she's going to get plenty of attention. And I share the dark part of the story because it just makes it so much sweeter that she's now holding this amazing little baby. And I also wished her a lot of luck with the cloth diapers and all of that. So I looked at her registry and I was like, oh my gosh, like, she's just such a better person than I am. I don't even know what to do. So anyways, to those who know that they need the saving and they want the saving, the gospel of Jesus is the best news ever. And in Hebrews, it talks about our sweet salvation. Behold, the preciousness of Jesus is what Natalie told us at the beginning of the year when she did our introduction to Isaiah. And this verse kind of sums up the heart of Isaiah and the heart of the Bible. It says, surely God is my salvation. I will trust and not be afraid. The Lord is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. With joy, you will draw water from the wells of salvation. Like, they use salvation 3 times in that verse. Like, it's kind of a big deal. It's like baby Lucia. So I want you guys to think about, what is your response when you hear the good news? Like, that Jesus saves. Like, how does that hit you? What does it make you feel? In Revelation 3:20, it says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into them. So the news, like I said, it's not the best news to anybody, or not to everybody, but to some people, it's even bad news. 2 Corinthians 2:13 says, the fragrance of the knowledge of Jesus is life to those being saved and death to those who are perishing. And James 2:19 says, even demons confess belief in God and shudder. They're like, we get it. We know he's real. We just no thanks. And Natalie talked about at the beginning of the year, the thing that we forget and that would make us not grateful for the salvation that we have is that we forget our human tendency to sin. It is so real for all of us. And I talked a few weeks ago about how when I was a kid at camp and I accepted Jesus for the first time, I knew at 9 years old, like I just knew that I'm sinful. And even more so now because I've had all this time to sin. So if you get a chance, it's just an interesting exercise, like in different things I've heard them say, say to yourself, I'm a sinner, and look to the person to your right and left and tell them you are a sinner. And try it the opposite way. Like look at yourself in the mirror and say, I am not a sinner. And you can feel in your body, I know I can, that is not the truth. It's just kind of interesting. So this quote by John Piper, I wanted to share because as a kid, I just knew it, but I just like how he puts words to this. He says, whose sin? Mine. When we exchange the glory of God for the glory of created things, that's what sin is. We had it. It was our treasure. When Adam and Eve were created, that God was our treasure. We loved God. We cherished, we esteemed, we respected, we were in awe of and worshiped God, praised God, and glorified God. And then we traded God. We've all done it every day. We embrace other values, other treasures, other desires that are so much stronger in our hearts than God is. We've traded him so that we lack God's glory. It's not our treasure. We've just thrown it away. Sin is anything you do in that process. Anything that reflects that God is not your treasure is actually sin. So all have sinned and all lack. We all throw away, we all exchange, demean, belittle, trample the infinite value of the glory of God. Like, whoa, John Piper's intense, but I just like that he puts this very descriptive detail to this thing that we kind of just like try to ignore, and it's not always defined. And it's anytime that we're not putting God first, and it makes it so clear. So that's the first thing the Israelites did and that we do. We forget that our human tendency is to sin. And when I think of my own sin, I can't help but think of this verse, and it's so humbling. It's Luke 7:47. It says, therefore I tell you, her sins, comma, which are many, comma, are forgiven. Like it had to be, which are many, don't worry. For she loved much. The one that's forgiven much loves much. I do feel like I'm forgiven, and I'm so thankful for that because I feel like I've been forgiven for a lot of things, and that just makes me all the more grateful. The other thing that we forget is that our enemy is real. And I say that not to like be too hung up on spiritual battle or darkness and all that stuff, but we've talked about in Mothers Together before, we need to acknowledge that it is our real thing, that there is an enemy and that he is out to steal and kill and destroy. In John 10:10, it says, the enemy comes to do those things, but I have come to give life and life to the full. And when I look at the news and the way of the world, in addition to my own heart, again, you just know the news is worse every morning when we get up. It's just our human nature to be evil and selfish. And I believe that Satan comes for us. And I wanted to share about a time I felt like he was coming for me. And I don't think I've shared about this before at Mothers Together, but I experienced postpartum depression pretty bad with my second. And the only thing that's more tiring than a mental illness is trying to pretend like you don't have a mental illness. I reached a low point and my default was just crying. Like I cried every chance I could be alone. But the part that was just so heavy on me, it just felt like this darkness was pressing down on me and I couldn't control it. And the more I tried to ignore it, the worse it got. And it was an emotional pain that was so intense that my body physically hurt from the pain. And I think at some point we just stop thinking clearly so we don't reach out for help. Because when I say this now, and I think if it were any of you, I'd be like, girl, we got you. Like, let's fix this. But because it was me, I, just was like, it's fine. It's fine. This is, I've got a baby. I'm tired. I told myself. So it's scary and painful when I even look back on it. And I just remember even feeling one day like I shouldn't be driving myself or my children anywhere. And but then putting on the smile again and coming to Mothers Together about 7 years ago. And I remember when a teacher was sharing, and she was sharing about her struggle with depression and how she had contemplated suicide. And I was like, whoa, like, I'm glad I don't have to deal with that, like in my head. And she said, if you are alive and breathing today, it's because God wants you to be alive, that you are alive on purpose. And I was just sitting there and just tears started running down my face. But I was like, this isn't what I do. I cry when I'm not around the people, not when I'm around the people. Why am I crying? And I couldn't figure out why these tears were rolling down my face. And it made me realize that I guess I did need help. And I guess I was struggling with that. So I did get help in several ways. And by God's grace, I can honestly say that this verse for myself that I want to read to you is so tender to me, because I had experienced such darkness and pain that there was just a little bit of light that I knew was there at the end of the tunnel. And I just followed that like it was my job. And I got out, and it's only by God's grace. So Psalm 41:3 says, I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire. He set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand. He put a new song in my mouth, and a hymn of praise to our God. So I'm so happy to report that, you guys. I have a new song in my mouth and in my heart because God is so good. And that makes me unapologetically and excitedly welcoming to the best news ever. So as I mentioned, if you want this salvation and you want to be saved, you are grateful for the salvation. So when the sin and the darkness and the power of the enemy are real to you, if it's no joke, you're going to be grateful to receive all of that. So the big news that we've been talking about all year, it changes us. It changes our minds. It changes our mind. It breaks our hearts. It changes our behavior. Like the pandemic happened and we all changed what we were doing. We stayed inside. We wore masks. We're getting vaccines and all these things. And it might be a sudden change that God does in your heart. It might be a slow process. But as Eliana boldly shared, she said, there is no way we can know about the good news of Jesus and not be called to do something. In Isaiah 6, it says, here I am, Lord, send me. And in the same way, think about how you've changed since you've been a parent. So just kind of this has been a little heavy. So I'll share a silly story. My husband, Jimmy, is like a super germaphobe. And 2 years before we had kids, we were auntie and uncle to little Charlie, and Jimmy was holding him, and he is a toddler, and he's got his Dockers on and his collared shirt, and he's all clean and everything, and he has a diaper on underneath, and he just tooted. And Jimmy freaked out, handed him back to my sister-in-law, and went and washed his hands, like scrubbed, like he was going into surgery. And we were like, oh my gosh, Lord, help this man. We've had 3 babies. I can't even tell you how many diapers we've done. So he had to adjust like a lot. And it's been a slow process, but he would get very upset about the diapers. And now he can handle it. So luckily we're out of them by now. So anyways, we are changed by big news. Okay. So Isaiah's news to the Israelites, it fell flat. They were stubborn and they did not change. And the change that we're talking about, it's kind of like what kind of change? All it is that God wants us to put him first. In Matthew 22:37, it gives the greatest commandment. Love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your understanding, and love your neighbor as yourself. So love God and love people. Everything falls under that. Like, it's so simple. And when we seek him first, everything seems to fall into place. And then when we don't have him first, it seems like nothing will fall into place. Like, everything feels like it's falling apart. I know for me. And Kathy challenged us when she spoke, Kathy Burkholder. She gave the question, when is the last time you trusted God and stood firm in your faith? When we put God first and we stand firm in our faith, we can do what Holly talked about. We can have certain hope in uncertain times. And she is so beautiful how she passes that on to her children so that they can have hope in uncertain times. We can also have joy when things are not joyful, like Amanda shared about, or joy in surrendering in a difficult time, like with a sick child, as Emily shared about. We put God first and we can have those things. And loving his people is hard. I want to be better at it. And one of the things that I try to do is a little devotional with my kids. If you can read this, Bob Goff has this devotional for kids. He has a book for adults called Love Does. And then he also has Everybody Always. And he gives the cutest little stories of just like a quick little couple page thing you can read to your kids. And he thinks outside the box. Like, I wish I thought out of the box. And we joke because my 9-year-old's starting to get sarcasm now. So I'm like, go get some people sometimes. Like, he doesn't say love some people sometimes. It says love everybody always, which is so challenging, even the unlovable. And so he really helps me think out of the box with that. And Natalie shared that we are called to share God's character, not out of an obligation, but out of love for him. And Matthew 3:11 says, Jesus will ignite the kingdom life within you, a fire within you, the Holy Spirit within you, changing you from the inside out. And that is actually our theme verse for next year. Live from the inside out. So 21, 22 mothers together, get excited. We are studying Matthew. And that is our verse. And there's even a cool, catchy song that goes with it. So don't worry, you'll probably get to hear that a couple hundred times. But I encourage you this summer to read Matthew. You can just pour through it over the summer. And especially if you're on serve team, be leading by example and reading through Matthew and stay connected. You do not need to, pause everything. I know it feels good to wrap up today, but also you could read Matthew with your small group. We're going to be sending out different resources and you can draw on those as well. You could just do socials with your small group, but you need to be in fellowship and you need to be connected so that we don't start to feel isolated like Michelle talked about at the beginning. I know I do, and it doesn't take long. Also, reach out for prayer. If you do not feel comfortable reaching out to your small group, my name and number have been on the Mothers Together website the entire year. And I was nervous. I was going to get a lot of calls and not one person, no one has called me. So I'm going to write down my phone number and you guys can call me. It's 805-705-0027. So you can call me anytime and you can have prayer because we all need it. So I'm excited next year to study Matthew with you and figure out how we live out from the inside of our hearts that are changed out to be like God and be putting him first and loving him and loving other people. So thank you guys so much. It's been a great year. Love you. Have a great discussion.